Man, we are talking about a topic today. We're in James chapter 3. Um, Sobering topic is probably the one, if there's something that I struggle, okay, let me back that. There's a lot that I struggle with. The aspect of the tongue and what we say is one of those that, man, has it tripped me up in years past. There's a scripture that says, where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, right? Hey, you start talking a lot, guess what you put yourself in? An opportunity to sin a whole bunch. Because that's where a lot of our sin comes from in what we say. And I know that firsthand. And so, like I say, that's what Proverbs says, where there's many where there are many words, transgressions unavoidable. There was an old Greek poet, Simonides, 500 BC or whatever. But he said this: I have often regretted my speech, never my silence, right? And so we would do well to just kind of be reminded of that. And in the course of my life, I have said some things and ruined some relationships, literally, and so many other things. My kids were a little embarrassed to bring their friends over to the house. They would always caution me, and Dad, look, can you just not do what you do, right? Because I have this tendency to be sarcastic, and my kids say, Dad, you're like the king of awkward. You just ask these questions, and it just puts people in this awkward situation. And so I've tried over the years to improve, probably not too much. Have I made that improvement? But I'm trying. If you knew the things that I don't say, you would go, that guy is a rock star when it comes to that stuff. And so, sometimes we forget what are outside words and what are inside words and all of those things. And so learning how to do that is crucial. And James, and I'm just going to remind us of what James is doing. He is squeezing the hypocrisy out of us. That's the whole point. This is what I love about this book. It's one of my favorite books to read, to remind myself, and to teach. There's several books that I find in the scriptures that are really powerful. The book of Ephesians, to me, lays down the whole trek from beginning to end of the Christian life, right? And so it was always one of my favorite books. The book of 1 John gave me freedom when it helped me understand that how do I know that I'm a believer? And John walked us through some very specific things. Not that we do in order to be saved, but as we see them in our life, we know that we are. And then James comes along, and he says, hey, I know what's in your heart, but I see how you live in your life. So let's see if we can't get all that in sync. And so I'm going to squeeze hypocrisy out of you. And so we call this book Living Out Loud, right? That what's in us should be lived out loud. This is why we're here, so that could take place. And so this is a book of becoming. That's a term I love to use, that we're all in the process of becoming something. None of us are sitting here trying to behave. I mean, you may be trying to behave, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't just to be a Christian and behave. The goal is to become something. To the old man to die, the new man to come, right? And so we're becoming something. And so we've gone through this book, and he's talked to us about trials and temptation and favoritism. And so we see where he's saying, hey, listen, you don't do trials like the rest of the world. The rest of the world freaks out with trials, not us. We find joy in it. Why? Because the trial's joyful? No, but we know the end result that's going to come from that. And when we see temptation, hey, we're not going to go blame everyone. We're not playing the victim. When I sin, it's my fault, and I know it, because I should have known better than to chase that shiny lure that Satan threw out there. And so he talked about listening and doing, that we should be people of the Word. That we should listen, slow down. When we get a chance to look at the Word, let it get in us and in our life and all of that. We talked about favoritism and how there is no favoritism in the kingdom of God. We treat everybody. There's no eyes that you lock with and look into that are not deeply loved by God. Not even the worst person you can think of. That worst person you can think of is deeply loved by God. And so it's important that we see that. We talked in terms of our faith. We can't just go around going, I'm a Christian, and not have works that back that up. The whole goal is for people to see that. And so it's not enough just to go, no, I'm a believer, I got faith. Well, really? Well, James says if you got faith, you can say it. I'm going to show you mine. Show you mine by how I live. And so this is everything that we've been looking at, and it's so powerful. And so we come to this one today, and he says this. Let's read it, and then we'll just kind of do a running commentary on it. Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow believers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who's never at fault is in what he says is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check. When we put bits into the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn the whole animal. Or take a ship as an example. Although they are large and driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants it to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of the body, but it makes great boasts. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among us, the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and itself is set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, sea creatures, all can be tamed and have been tamed by mankind. But no human can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse human beings who have been made in the image of God. Out of the same mouth come both praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. So there it is. That's the whole point today. We're just going to talk about the tongue. This will be short but painful, right? And so we're just going to kind of let it flow as it does. So, hey, whoever made that statement, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, didn't live in my neighborhood. Did you live in yours? Because I'm telling you, that I've been beat up a time or two. Some of it self-inflicted, you know, when you let things fall on you and all of that. And it hurts. And I, you know, but there's nothing that hurts like the words that people can say to us. And so we just have to know that. In fact, Proverbs 18:26, I think it's 26, could be 21, that says that there is life and death in the tongue, right? You think about the power that you have to speak into somebody's life and the damage that you can do. If I were to ask you right now to think, isn't it amazing how the brain can work? No matter how old you get, our memories, we can remember something that someone said to us 20 years ago, can't we? And it hurts and it bites, and we think about that, right? And so this happens. This is a real thing. I think about it almost every time we're talking about the tongue. And I may have shared this story with you before, I don't know. But when I was in 7th grade, you know, you get your annual, and all the kids sign the annual. It's a big deal. Ellen Smith School Cougars, that's where I went. And so in the front of that, we used to have it in our shelves by our fireplace when we lived up in the mountains, but I don't know where it is now, probably in a box somewhere, and probably a great place to be. Because when I opened that up, one of my friends wrote this in my annual, "To Mr. Big Ears." Now, you read that as a 7th or 8th grader, and it's devastating, right? And I remember, I was so grateful I lived in the 70s because I could convince my dad to let me grow my head's gotten big enough now that my ears, I know you're looking at my ears now, you're going, oh, they are kind of big, but my head's gotten bigger, you know, but I would tape my ears at night because one person put in my annual, "To Mr. Big Ears." And I remember that to this day, right? And so I would beg Dad. Dad was one of those guys, you know, high and tight kind of haircuts. And I'm like, "Dad, please." Everybody else, I wanted my hair long, not because I wanted to be cool. I just didn't want somebody to see my big ears. And it's crazy, you know, and it's easy to joke about it now. But I'm telling you, man, when you were back in those days, it was all you could think about. You know, I mean, you want to be a ladies' man, and you think, oh, they're going to see me coming in my ears first. You know, they're going to call me Dumbo, right? And so you think those things. And so I guess I just want to remind us that we really can shape people's lives for years based on what somebody says about us, right? You have the wrong person call you stupid or lazy or whatever else, and it will affect you, won't it? You know, I mean, I don't want you to, you know, air your dirty laundry. I don't mind doing mine, but we know those things are true. We know that it can hurt. I have had a relationship in the past where I made some biting words to who was once someone who was my close friend, and we were partners in church together. And it was at a time when everybody was just beginning to get into travel ball and all that. And you know, you start doing travel ball, you're just always gone. You're doing stuff all the time. Well, we had this very important meeting at the church in my mind, and he said, "Hey, man, I can't make it. We got travel ball." And I remember looking at him and going, "Hey, man, you need to fish or cut bait." And man, I was arrogant back then, and all up in my business, my own business. And I saw the look in his face, but part of it's like, you need to hear that, right? I sound like a jerk, don't I? But a lot of us can make those statements. Well, it wasn't that much longer that he created really a big stink in the church, and it caused a great division. And it was easy to blame him and go, well, what was he thinking? You know, calling me all these things. But as the years go by, and then you reconnect, and I know exactly what it was that stimulated that response. It was what I said. It was my words that wounded him. And when he saw an opportunity to wound me, he took it. I don't fault him for any of that. That was all me, because I was calloused and silly about the words that came out of my mouth. And so I'm just saying that up front, full confession, so that when it gets nasty in here in a minute, you're going to be, okay, well, he's anyway, it's not going to get bad. But the tongue reveals our hypocrisy, right? If we say we love Jesus, but we don't love our brother, how can the love of God be in us? That's how John says it. And so I don't have the privilege of just vomiting what my unfiltered thoughts to you because it's what you needed to hear. Paul says, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth, but only that you spent some time thinking about, so that you would say words that might bring encouragement at the time that it was needed, right? And so these are the things that matter. Our words ought to give life. That's what it has to give, life. And if we don't do that, I haven't been practicing, you may not can tell, to listen more than I speak. And so, because it's easy I process things fast, even in my old age, I process fast. You start talking, I pretty much already know where you're going to go, and I'm kind of a bottom line guy, and it's easy for me. I could just go, hey, can we get that bottom line, and then let me just talk because I can fix your problem, right? But what we need to do is just learn to slow down and listen. So now let's look at this text again. It's just going to flow pretty quickly. There's not a lot to it, but let's just look at it. It says, "Not many of you should become teachers, my fellow brothers, because you know that we who teach will be judged more strictly." Now, so he starts off going, "Hey, man, listen. Not a lot of you ought to become teachers." Now, one of the things that irks me today, and I get in trouble every time I say it, but I think if half the pastors in America would resign, the church might grow. I think we have too many people who just wanted to call themselves a pastor, and they got, they wear some cool jeans, and they got a slick way of doing things, and they've read, How to Win Friends, Influence People, and that's about all they know, and they can stand up stage, and there's a great band. Is this my sarcasm coming out? Should I be careful? And they just say stupid things. And they make the scriptures say things it doesn't say. And it's not just to the hip young church that's been going on. You listen to some of the old churches, the Bible thumper stuff, and it's all that whole legalism stuff. It's just bondage that they're putting the Christians in when God is calling us to grace. And that's why he's saying it. Don't stand up and speak for me if you've got hypocrisy in that aspect of your life, right? You get all that squeezed out of you before you step in to the aspect of ministry and teaching. But I don't think it's just limited to those who stand behind tables and pulpits. All of us who tend to want to speak for God from the scriptures ought to be careful, right? Because I don't like people to take my words and make them and twist them and make me sound like I said something I didn't say, and I'm pretty sure God doesn't like that either. And so we have to be careful about that. You have to be careful who you listen to. Man, legalism will just wreck your life. And then those who push a lot of mysticism in, which you see that these days as well, into the church, that's grounded not in truth, but a little bit in just a little bit of feeling and a little bit of other thing. The days of the charismania when it was kind of a crazy thing as well, the health and wealth. And there's a whole thing on me focusism right now, where we just focused on ourselves, and everybody's just trying to make everybody's life a little bit better. And we're not talking about the hard things that should be talked about. And so he says here, listen, let not many of you become teachers, for by it, man, there was a time when, and I mean still now, but I remember being backstage at New Covenant when we had that building. And I would wander back there, and I would cry, Lord, could you just come back now before I have to speak? Because I'm scared to death to stand up here and do this stuff, And I'd cry, God, I don't want to say anything wrong. If there's something going on, I mean, I do it now more privately, But back then, it was that stage, man. I mean, I'd get back there behind that and just do that. People came back there, they'd go, man, that's crazy, man. He's got his hands going up everywhere. I'm just crying out to God, because I don't want to mess things up for people. And I think more pastors ought to take that stance. So then he said, so the first thing is, hey, man, most teachers just, ought to sit down. Second thing we see, and it's in verse 2, that the tongue is the last beast to tame, to become mature. So look what he says. We all stumble in many ways. Anyone who is never at fault at what he says is perfect, able to keep the whole body in check. Now, he's not being sarcastic there. Oh, you think you're perfect. The word perfect there means mature. He says, how do we know that we really are a mature believer in Christ? He says the sure way you're going to know it, that's the last thing to tame is your mouth. Right? We know how to play a game in a lot of other areas, but you put us in the right situation, all of a sudden we start vomiting a bunch of stuff. We go, you're not as mature as you thought you were. The mature person, the last piece of the puzzle that comes together, and that's what he's saying, is when we start speaking words of life consistently, and we speak truth consistently in love, then that's what we do. It's the truest reflection of our heart. And so it's powerful that you and I see it that way and understand that. So if you're wondering, hey, where am I spiritually? Well, just think back on the conversations that you've said. And just think about the things you go, man, I probably shouldn't have said that. I wish I hadn't said that, right? If you find yourself, when you start taking inventory of your past week, that there was a lot more you shouldn't have said than you did, then you need to realize, okay, I'm not as mature as I thought I was. Now, then he comes into verse 3 and he says this. When we put bits in the mouths of horses to make them obey us, we can turn that whole animal. Or take ships for an example. Although they're so large, they're driven by strong winds, but that little bitty rudder, right, can turn the whole ship around. And so it's the note that I have is the tongue determines the outcome of so much, right? It determines who I'm going to be friends with. Because there are people that, I don't know how you pick friends, but there are certain friends I'm like, man, they just talk about themselves all the time. It wears me out. And they're always talking about everybody's problems, and it wears me out, right? I mean, so, and then if I'm the one doing that, and you wonder, well, why nobody want to hang out with me? Well, maybe it's because of what you're saying, Pardue. Why don't you just rethink that whole process? And so it's a little thing, right? Just like he says, it's a little rudder, or it's a little bit in the horse's mouth, but that one thing can determine whether or not who we're going to have as friends and who we're going to lose as friends. What job we're going to get, what job we're going to lose, right? I mean, especially in the world where I am now as a culture officer, I do a lot of reviewing that, so I'm in charge of reviewing everybody's work, and so we work through a couple of areas. We have two sections. One is their capability in their job, and one is the culture habit of their life. And what my guys are beginning to understand is that your S is responsible for your culture. If you're a bad apple, and if you're gossiping about people, and you're not, we have a policy that we don't go lateral and complain about things. We go upline and complain about things, right? So if I've got a superior and I don't like something, I'm going to go to him, but I don't get to go this way. You're going to get let go for that just as fast as you get let go of not knowing your job, and so it's raising the standard there, but it should, right? I mean, that thing is devastating to each other, and so these are the things that we talk about at work, and these are the things that James is trying to let us know. And he speaks to the fact that it determines others' outcomes, right? We go back to our kids. My words that we spoke to our kids shape their life. If they got a kid in here just belching for us, thank you that. This is grandson. He's 3 months. He can do it, right? But there really are inside words and outside words. I forgot where I got this illustration, but when it told it to me, it was a guy like kind of laying on his deathbed. He had a pillow behind him, and somebody came in, wanted to apologize and make amends, and said, "Will you forgive me?" He said, "Here's what I need you to do." He said, "Take my pillow," and he said, "It's a feather pillow." He said, "I want you to open it up. I want you to just open that window and just toss all those feathers out everywhere." And so the guy, "That's the strangest thing I've ever heard," but he tossed his feathers at it. Then the man says, "Now, go collect all those feathers, and I'll forgive you." The whole point was, And this, obviously the man forgave him. He said, that's the power of words, though. Once said, you can't take them back. Many a truth is said in jest. You can't just go, oh, I was kidding, or I didn't mean it, or I was mad. They came out of your mouth, and it reveals what's in the heart, right? Jest or not, that's the power of these words, and this is what he's saying here. It's like lighting a match, he says. It destroys everything. We really, and I'm preaching more to me than anybody else, but we really have to think about the words that we say. I'm tired of dealing with families who don't want to talk to each other, and they're mad because something that somebody said years ago, and it's so true. It happens all the time, and it's a sad situation to see what goes on. I don't want. My goal is to finish my race on this life, sliding in, all dirty and muddy and full of life, but with no regrets. Right? I want to finish strong, having felt like I've just given it all, but I don't want to have any regrets about my words having affected somebody else's lives. And we have to think that way. This is exactly what he's saying here. It's like striking a match. The tongue also is a fire, he says, a world of evil among the many parts of the body. It is so cut. My sarcasm is terrible. It's getting a little better, but man, it's just brutal. It's like what happens when you man, years ago I have a burn because I had it on the muffler of my lawnmower, and it'll burn and you don't even know it. Right? I mean, you don't even know it's hot. I mean, it's because it just numbed everything. And then all of a sudden that pain is intense. That's what happens with people with sarcasm. It doesn't hurt for a minute, and you walk away going, wait, that hurt. Right? And so we have to be careful with the words that we say and what we do. There is life and death in the tongue. Let's just kind of have a conversation before we move to the last point. But how are you doing in that area? Right? How you doing in the area of gossip this week? Just think back this week. Was there some things that you said that you know probably shouldn't have been said? And you could have couched it any way you want to. I don't want to use a cheesy illustration about, it's a prayer request, but you know how we do that, right? So how are you doing there? If you look back at the conversations that you had, was there gossip involved in that was unhealthy? I had to bring 2 employees in, like children, this week because of that whole issue. And I had to because they came in, I had to bring their direct upline in there. So we got 4 people plus me having a conversation because somebody decided they want to talk sideways instead of up. And it was everybody was talking about. I was on vacation. I missed the whole thing. I'm like, this is the silliest thing I've heard in my life. It felt like I'm dealing with kids in the room. Get in here, And so we bring everybody in. We have that conversation. It can be devastating. It can destroy the company. Rumor, same thing. And sometimes we love to assume the worst in people, and then tell everybody, well, here's what I think's going on. Right? It may not have been anything like that. Criticism, how you doing there? That's probably one that's at the top of my list for a long time. It's easy for me just to be critical. You don't mind me just vomiting on you, dude. But there was a time, I was going and blowing as a pastor. We had moved into our house on Old Springville Road. Tammy took it upon herself with my sister-in-law to paint the living room. It looked great. I came in, and I looked. She said, oh, look at what I did. And there was a spot of paint on the ceiling. And the first thing, I know it's terrible. The first thing out of my mouth was there was a spot on the ceiling. It literally crushed her, and I'm thinking, well, it's just me, and it's wrong, but it haunts me. Those kind of things when you do that stuff, right? Because it can destroy people, and so I just think, man, let's just take time. Let's just think about that. I know we like to couch things too in this statement. Well, I just tell it like it is. Well, hey, how about you don't, right? I mean, I'm guilty of that. Well, they need to hear it. Well, maybe not from you. Not with that attitude. Maybe God will bring somebody softer to tell them that. But I don't think you're going to do it. Now, I'm speaking to myself, but I'm just telling you these are true. And so it's just important that we kind of think through those things. Well, I told you it was going to be a little painful. Let's jump out of here. 7 through 12. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but nobody, no human can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With the tongue we praise God our Father, and with it we curse humans, and that ought not happen. Out of the same mouth comes praise and cursing. And he's like, here's what he's saying. You get what he's saying, right? Fresh water and spring water can't. And salt water can't come out of the same thing. You don't get grapes out of tomato bushes, and you shouldn't get garbage coming out of your mouth from a believer. And this is what he's saying. He's literally saying, let's squeeze the hypocrisy out of our life. So then we just kind of, I think it does well for us to remember that everybody's about that far from cracking up, right? What they don't need is always our lectures that we think we're helping somebody with. I got friends, and I may be that sometimes too, that just feels like, okay, well, I can fix your problem real quick. Let me just do that. Well, it took me a long time to realize that most people don't want to get fixed. They just want to be heard. And the fixing can come later, but probably not there. And so if we listen for, in fact, I think I wrote about that when I was taking one of my walks on the beach when it related to just kids. I think one of the greatest things we can do as parents is to talk a whole lot less and listen more. Listen to what's going on in your child's heart, because that's where everything is fought. Right? I realize it's in the mind. That's a thought. You don't understand the thoughts and can't reprogram that until you hear their heart. And so when we're parenting, we want to hear what's going on in the heart of the child. We don't want to assume, right? That's what I used to do in parenting a lot, right? You just assume, But Daddy, no, I don't need to hear anything. No, I know what happened. Well, I didn't, right? And so the goal is to hear the heart and then see if we can't change the thought behind the heart. Because sometimes that thought isn't a mean one. It comes from an inferior complex where they're scared and they don't know what's going on. Does this make sense to us? It never changes when we're adults either. Sometimes we see adults and it's the same way. They're reacting the way they are because they're scared or because they've got a false thought that somebody ingrained them and they don't know any better. And so it's our job to speak words of life into that situation. That's what a mature believer does. Same thing in our marriage, same thing with our friends, same thing with social media. I'm almost embarrassed these days at social media and what I see going on back and forth. It's like people are just mean. I'm like, you're not mean. If we were talking together, you wouldn't be saying the stuff that you're saying on there. And I'm like, man, maybe some of you should just get off. I'm not speaking to that. I'm just saying, get off social media if all you're going to do is just unfiltered thoughts because you can't see the person behind your keyboard that you're writing to. It's still wrong, right? Words of life. This is what we do. This is what we give. That doesn't mean it's not hard, but it means that truth is wrapped in love. And it ought to be wrapped in a whole lot more love than it is the truth aspect of things. Because that's, he says, is the chief thing that deal, is that whole thing about love, right? So, all right, enough of that. It's painful. Let's get out of here. Anyway, man, I'm so grateful for this book and to be able to work through it. And so this week, here's our homework, man. We're gonna try and speak a lot more positive, encouraging words and listen twice as much as we speak and see what the Lord does. All right, got a song for us.